I still remember the first day I saw Emily like it happened seconds ago. It was raining outside, soft gray rain that drummed gently on the window of that tiny campus coffee shop. I was hunched over a cracked laptop, pretending to study, when she walked in wearing this worn-out green hoodie that swallowed her frame, her hair still damp from the drizzle. She shook it out, muttered something under her breath, and laughed at herself before even looking around. And in that laugh, God, in that laugh, I felt something pull at my chest so hard it almost hurt. She caught my eye, gave me this shy, almost teasing smile, and sat 2 tables away. I remember every stupid detail. The way she wrapped her hands around her mug to warm them, the way her eyes moved when she read. Somehow, by the time I left that cafe, I knew her name, her favorite band, and that she hated Sundays because they felt lonely and slow. We were 19, poor, stubborn, and hopelessly in love before we even had the right to use that word. Our relationship grew in cramped dorm rooms and bad takeout. We fought about silly things, me forgetting to text, her showing up late, but we always made up, usually with whispered apologies at 2 a.m., tangled up in sheets that smelled of cheap detergent. I was never the perfect boyfriend. I kept secrets, not the kind that hurts, but the kind born from fear. The biggest secret was my company. By sophomore year, I was quietly coding late at night, answering emails while Emily slept beside me, breathing softly, her hand always drifting across the bed to find mine. What started as a small app exploded into something real. Before graduation, I had an actual office, a small but brilliant team, and revenue that felt surreal for a kid my age. But I kept living like the broke student she first fell for. I drove a rusty '04 Civic. My watch was an old Casio that had a crack on the glass. My clothes were clean, but cheap. And Emily, sweet Emily, never once asked why I couldn't take her to nicer places, or why our dates stayed so humble. She'd just smile, rest her head on my shoulder, and whisper that she liked it better that way. And maybe that's why I fell even harder. Because I saw in her someone who wanted me, not what I could give. Or so I thought. But there was always a shadow over us. Her family. Old money. Her father, Richard, was the walking definition of pride, a man whose handshake felt like a test, whose questions always felt like traps. Her mother, Claire, was colder, polite to the point of cruelty, the kind of woman whose smile feels like it's carved from ice. And then there was William, her older brother, the golden son, who never let Emily forget that she was supposed to protect the family name. At dinners, Richard would ask, "And what is it you really do, son?" I'd say I had a small tech business, deliberately vague. His mouth would tighten. Claire would change the subject with a forced laugh. Emily would squeeze my knee under the table, her silent apology for them. Then there was Alex, my best friend since middle school. Charismatic, loud, confident in a way that made people listen when he spoke. He worked as an investment consultant, making around 30 grand a month. Not billionaire money, but enough to live flashy. New car, expensive suits, Instagram photos at rooftop bars. Emily's parents adored him. They'd hint, subtly and sometimes not so subtly, about how ambitious he was. I trusted Alex more than I trusted myself. When Emily and I had arguments, Alex would listen, nod, sometimes give advice. He was there when I built my company from nothing, always patting me on the back, telling me it would work out, even if he didn't know the numbers behind it. And through it all, Emily and I stayed close. For almost 4 years, we built something that felt unbreakable. Lazy Sunday mornings cooking breakfast in pajamas, driving for hours just to find a beach we'd never seen before, falling asleep on the couch halfway through movies we promised to finish. But love, no matter how true, can be strangled by pressure. Richard's words became harsher. "Do you want to live your whole life wondering where the next check comes from?" Claire spoke to Emily late at night, telling her she was disrespecting generations by wasting her youth on a boy who couldn't secure her future. William stopped inviting her to family events unless I stayed home. The pressure wasn't gentle. It was a vice, squeezing slowly but relentlessly. And Emily, who always had fire in her eyes, began to look tired. I didn't see how deep it cut her. Or maybe I didn't want to see. We still kissed each other goodnight. Still whispered, "I love you," half asleep. I convinced myself love could shield us both. But there's something I never told Emily. That small tech business everyone dismissed, it was quietly pulling in over $500,000 a month. Almost everything went back into growth. But if I really wanted to, I could have pulled millions every year. The crazy part? Her family knew the company. They respected the company. It was small compared to giants, but respected in the industry for innovation. They just didn't know I was the one who built it. And for years, I kept that secret, wearing my cheap clothes and driving my old Civic, because I wanted Emily to love the man, not the money. And I believe she did. Until the day I overheard her crying on the phone, her voice cracking under the weight of what they demanded from her. Until I saw Alex looking at her like I used to. Until everything I thought was safe started to crumble in front of me. I remember the night everything shifted like the echo of a nightmare I can't wake up from. It had been raining all day, the kind of slow, steady rain that soaks through your clothes and makes everything feel heavier. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up in an old sweatshirt of mine she loved because it smelled like me, her hair messy, face soft with exhaustion. The TV flickered low light across the room, shadows dancing over her, and the faded carpet we'd spilled wine on 100 times. I got up quietly, careful not to wake her, just to cover her with a blanket. That's when her phone lit up beside her hand. The glow caught my eye before I could look away. One new message from her father, Richard. Enough, Emily. You know what's at stake. Alex is waiting. Do the right thing. You're about to throw away everything for someone who can't even take care of you. For a second, it felt like my heart stopped beating. My ears buzzed like the room itself was collapsing inward. Alex? Waiting? She stirred, opening her eyes slowly, blinking at my face. And I saw it, fear, guilt, love, all colliding behind those tired eyes. What's wrong? She whispered, her voice cracking like old wood. What does this mean, Em? My voice sounded strange in my own mouth. Alex is waiting? Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her shoulders shook, and she swallowed hard before words finally fell out in a whisper, raw and trembling. They won't stop, Chris. They're going to cut me off. They say I'm disgracing the family, that I'm throwing away my life with you. And Alex. The name tasted like poison on my tongue. She wiped tears from her face with shaking fingers. They're telling me I need someone real, someone who can secure my future, someone they approve of. Her voice broke again. They're threatening to ruin me, Chris. To ruin us. You don't know how far they'll go. I felt heat burn under my skin, anger, fear, helplessness. Do you want to be with him? No. She sobbed, louder than I'd ever heard. God, Chris, no. I love you. I never stopped loving you. But they're making everything impossible. Silence stretched between us, so thick I thought it would choke me. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for something, hope, forgiveness, maybe even permission to break both our hearts. In that moment, I realized the depth of her hell. For years together, lazy mornings in bed, cheap diners at midnight, her head on my chest as we watched the rain from the porch, and now, she was being torn apart by people who claimed to love her. The days that followed blurred together. Emily barely spoke. When she did, her words felt rehearsed, like someone else had written them. Her laugh, the sound I loved more than anything, vanished. At night, she'd curl up beside me, but her body felt tense, distant. I'd lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering when it would all finally shatter. And then, it did. Alex came over, walked through my door like he owned the air in the room. His suit crisp, watch gleaming, hair perfectly styled. He looked at me with something between pity and smugness. She deserves better, Chris, he said. His voice calm, almost rehearsed. Someone who can actually provide. Someone who doesn't hide behind this minimalist bullshit. The words hit harder than I expected. From anyone else, they'd be nothing. But from Alex, my best friend, the kid I'd grown up with, the guy who'd been at my side through every triumph and heartbreak, they cut deep. You think you're that man? I asked, my voice low, steady only because if I let it shake, I'd break. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. After he left, Emily stood in the doorway. Tears streamed down her face, her whole body shaking like a branch in a storm. I told him yes, she whispered, each word ripping itself from her throat. Why? My voice came out softer than I felt. She pressed her fist to her mouth. I squeezed shut. Because if I don't, they'll destroy you, Chris. They'll drag your name through the mud, hurt your business, ruin everything you built. I felt something inside me snap. So you're protecting me? By leaving me? I don't want to, she sobbed. I love you. But I can't watch them tear you apart because of me. That night, lying beside her in silence, I realized how deep the scars ran. I remembered every time she defended me at family dinners, every time she brushed off their insults, every time she whispered that love was enough. And I saw how they'd broken her spirit piece by piece. In the darkness, staring at the outline of her face, something hardened inside me. All these years, I'd hidden the truth of who I was, trying to keep love pure. But my silence had given her family power. It let them treat me like nothing, like some broke kid chasing dreams. The truth? That small tech business made over $500,000 a month. Most of it reinvested, yes, but if I wanted, I could have been living in penthouses, driving cars her family couldn't pronounce. And what none of them knew, the company they respected so deeply for its innovation, the one mentioned in magazines her father read every morning, was mine. I had built it from my dorm room, brick by brick, code by code. They thought they were forcing her into a better future with Alex, 30 grand a month, flashy suits, shallow charm. They didn't realize I was sitting quietly on an empire. For years, I stayed humble because I believed love shouldn't need proof. But now, I saw it wasn't just about me. By hiding who I was, I'd left Emily to fight alone. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let them break her. I wouldn't let Alex take her. And I wouldn't stay silent anymore. It was time for them to see the man they'd underestimated. The man who had everything they claimed to want for her, and more. And above all, it was time to remind Emily who I truly was, not just the boy she fell in love with, but the man who built something no one could take from him. The days after Emily's confession unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare, each one heavier than the last. The silence between us was suffocating, thick with unsaid words and shattered hopes. I watched her become a ghost of herself, the sparkle in her eyes dimming under the relentless pressure from her family's legacy. A legacy so tightly woven with expectations that it threatened to suffocate everything we built together. She'd leave early for the endless dinners, wearing that forced smile like armor, hiding the fractures beneath. I stayed behind in our small apartment, the cold walls echoing with emptiness, clutching my phone as I waited for a message that never came. Our conversations became sparse, mechanical even, as if the words were carefully rationed to avoid the inevitable pain. Emily tried to fight. I saw it in the way her fingers clenched into fists when she thought I wasn't looking, in the fire that flickered briefly whenever we spoke about the future we dreamed of. But the weight of their demands, the threat of being cut off from everything she had ever known, dragged her down into silence. One night, she came home later than usual, exhaustion etched deep into every line of her face. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "They want me to make a choice, Chris. Me or you. If I choose you, they'll erase me. No more support for school, no job opportunities, no family. They want me to become someone I'm not." I wanted to scream, to tear down the walls that held her captive, but the truth was I felt powerless. How do you fight against an empire built on blood, tradition, and cold, calculated cruelty? And then there was Alex, always there, lurking at the edges of her life. His messages arrived like poison, promising the world Emily's family believed she deserved: lavish dinners, exotic vacations, a life filled with luxury that I had intentionally kept hidden from her. I held on to hope, believing love could withstand anything. But doubt crept in, a slow, venomous erosion of trust. Emily began to drift away, the distance between us growing until it was an abyss that swallowed every tender moment we once shared. The day she told me she said yes to Alex shattered something inside me. The world blurred, and all I could hear was the hollow echo of my own heartbreak. "Why?" I whispered, voice barely steady. Tears streaked down her face as she answered. "Because they promised me a future. Because they said if I stayed with you, I'd lose everything." Her words cut deeper than any betrayal. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about survival. But something inside me refused to surrender. I summoned my closest team and made a decision that changed everything. I would stop hiding. I would reveal the truth. The company, the millions in revenue, the empire I had quietly built while living humbly beside her. When the news broke, it hit Emily's family like a thunderclap. The proud smiles faltered. The thin veneer of superiority cracked. Richard's face paled. Claire's eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. William's confident posture wavered. Emily watched it all unfold with a mix of shock and relief. The iron grip of her family loosened, and with it, the chains that bound her began to fall away. Slowly, she returned. not just to me, but to the woman I had always loved. In those moments, I understood that love wasn't just about quiet comfort or whispered promises. Sometimes, it meant standing tall, revealing your truth, and fighting fiercely for the future you both deserved. The days after Emily's confession unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare, each one heavier than the last. The silence between us was suffocating, thick with unsaid words and shattered hopes. I watched her become a ghost of herself, the sparkle in her eyes dimming under the relentless pressure from her family's legacy. A legacy so tightly woven with expectations that it threatened to suffocate everything we built together. She'd leave early for the endless dinners, wearing that forced smile like armor, hiding the fractures beneath. I stayed behind in our small apartment, the cold walls echoing with emptiness, clutching my phone as I waited for a message that never came. Our conversations became sparse, mechanical even, as if the words were carefully rationed to avoid the inevitable pain. Emily tried to fight. I saw it in the way her fingers clenched into fists when she thought I wasn't looking, in the fire that flickered briefly whenever we spoke about the future we dreamed of. But the weight of their demands, the threat of being cut off from everything she had ever known, dragged her down into silence. One night, she came home later than usual, exhaustion etched deep into every line of her face. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "They want me to make a choice, Chris. Me or you. If I choose you, they'll erase me. No more support for school, no job opportunities, no family. They want me to become someone I'm not." I wanted to scream, to tear down the walls that held her captive, but the truth was I felt powerless. How do you fight against an empire built on blood, tradition, and cold, calculated cruelty? And then there was Alex, always there, lurking at the edges of her life. His messages arrived like poison, promising the world Emily's family believed she deserved: lavish dinners, exotic vacations, a life filled with luxury that I had intentionally kept hidden from her. I held on to hope, believing love could withstand anything. But doubt crept in, a slow, venomous erosion of trust. Emily began to drift away, the distance between us growing until it was an abyss that swallowed every tender moment we once shared. The day she told me she said yes to Alex shattered something inside me. The world blurred, and all I could hear was the hollow echo of my own heartbreak. "Why?" I whispered, voice barely steady. Tears streaked down her face as she answered. "Because they promised me a future. Because they said if I stayed with you, I'd lose everything." Her words cut deeper than any betrayal. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about survival. But something inside me refused to surrender. I summoned my closest team and made a decision that changed everything. I would stop hiding. I would reveal the truth. The company, the millions in revenue, the empire I had quietly built while living humbly beside her. When the news broke, it hit Emily's family like a thunderclap. The proud smiles faltered. The thin veneer of superiority cracked. Richard's face paled. Claire's eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. William's confident posture wavered. Emily watched it all unfold with a mix of shock and relief. The iron grip of her family loosened, and with it, the chains that bound her began to fall away. Slowly, she returned, not just to me, but to the woman I had always loved. In those moments, I understood that love wasn't just about quiet comfort or whispered promises. Sometimes, it meant standing tall, revealing your truth, and fighting fiercely for the future you both deserved. When the truth finally came out, it wasn't loud or explosive like I'd imagined in late-night fantasies where I walked into their grand living room and dropped numbers like bombs. It was quieter, more surgical, but it cut deeper because of that. For years, I'd lived small on purpose. Old Civic with a crack across the windshield I never fixed. Watches that cost less than a meal out. Clothes so plain they faded without anyone noticing. Emily loved me anyway, or so I believed, and that belief kept me warm through every cold glance from Richard across dinner tables, every polite but not really question from Claire about long-term plans, every smirk from William, who seemed to think my love for his sister was a temporary hobby. And Alex, God, Alex, sat there through it all, smiling like he was part of the family already. Talking about bonuses, car leases, how he'd almost closed a deal big enough to finally buy that ridiculous watch he'd shown off to Emily once at dinner. I didn't pay attention then. I should have. But truth has a way of waiting, like embers under ash. and mine had been burning quietly for years. When I finally stopped hiding, it felt strangely calm. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I arrived at their next family dinner not in some flashy car, but in a clean, sharp suit, not even designer, just something that actually fit well, chosen carefully instead of carelessly. Alex was already there, sitting too close to Emily, leaning in with that practiced tilt of the head. William raised an eyebrow when I walked in. Richard's greeting was clipped. Claire barely hid the frost in her eyes. They asked again, as they always did, "How's your little tech thing going?" And this time, I didn't shrink. I spoke clearly, letting the numbers speak louder than any defense. $500,000 a month in revenue, contracts with firms they'd heard of, the expansion that had just started. The reinvestment strategy that kept profit on paper modest but growth insane. I saw it land, Claire's fork pausing midair, Richard's eyes narrowing, William's mouth opening just a bit like he had something to say but forgot it. Even Alex. His face stayed polite, but his shoulders stiffened. His eyes darted to Emily, and in that instant, I knew. He realized his borrowed shine couldn't outshine something real. Emily didn't say anything right away, but her hand, resting on her knee, clenched into a fist, like she was fighting something inside herself. After dinner, as everyone drifted into the hall with drinks, she pulled me aside. Her voice was low, trembling but edged with something fierce. "Why didn't you tell me?" I answered honestly, words heavy but true. "Because I wanted you to love me before you ever saw any of this. Because I thought it would ruin us." Her eyes glistened, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "You didn't ruin anything, Chris. You left me alone. You let them think you were small." She wasn't wrong. I'd built an empire in silence, but in doing so, I'd let her fight a battle with no weapon but her love for me. And love, cornered by fear and pressure, starts to fracture. A week later, Alex came to see me. No family, no witnesses, just us in the fading evening light outside my office. He tried to be casual, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets. "You really think you can keep her? After everything?" I didn't answer him. Didn't need to. Truth hung in the space between us, and for once, his confidence looked like desperation. Then Emily came to me. Not at some grand party, not in a dramatic rainstorm, just at my door one night, wearing that hoodie she'd stolen from me years ago, the one that still smelled faintly of coffee and cheap cologne. Her words weren't rehearsed. They spilled out like breath she'd been holding too long. "I don't care what they think anymore. I don't care what they threaten. I can't lose you." I asked her, voice cracking in spite of everything. "Are you sure, Em? This isn't going to be easy." She stepped closer, tears finally falling, and in that moment, the years of pressure and fear and secrets seemed to fall away. "It never was, Chris. But it's real." The next time we saw her family, Emily stood beside me, shoulders squared. Richard looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Claire's silence was ice, but it no longer cut. William offered a stiff nod. And Alex? He didn't come at all. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't empty. Her hand found mine across the console, and she held it so tightly I could feel her pulse racing against my skin. It wasn't over. We still had scars, cracks, and trust that needed time to heal. But for the first time in what felt like forever, we faced it together, not me hiding behind humble lies, not her shielding me from a family that never really cared about either of us. And somewhere between the streetlights flashing by and the quiet hum of the engine, I realized love isn't about hiding who you are to be loved. It's about being seen fully, flaws and strengths and secrets, and choosing each other anyway. She chose me, and I chose to finally let her see me. And that truth, unpolished, painful, imperfect, was worth more than anything I'd ever built alone. The day everything truly changed didn't come with fireworks or triumphant music. It came quietly, on a morning when the sun barely pierced the gray sky. Emily was standing by the window in our small apartment, the one that still smelled faintly of paint from when we'd first moved in together. She looked so tired, shoulders slumped, hair tied back loosely like she'd given up trying to make it perfect. When she turned, her eyes met mine, and for the first time in months, there was no apology, no fear, just raw honesty. "Chris," she whispered, her voice so soft it barely reached me, "I'm done running." She stepped closer, closing the space that had grown between us, and laid her palm against my chest. I felt her heartbeat through my own. "I don't care what they think anymore. I don't care what I lose. If they cut me off, let them. If they hate me, let them." Her eyes glistened. "I can't lose you again." It wasn't a grand speech, but it was everything. I pulled her into my arms, holding her so tightly it felt like I was anchoring us both to something real, something unbreakable. Then we faced them. Together, I said, my voice low but steady. The following days were a blur of whispered plans and nervous courage. We talked late into the night, the kind of talks we hadn't had in so long, what we wanted our life to look like if it wasn't shaped by anyone else's demands, where we'd live, what we'd keep, what we'd leave behind. Emily cried sometimes, not because she doubted us, but because saying goodbye to the version of her life she'd been raised to expect felt like mourning someone who never really existed. Then came the confrontation. Emily's family invited us, summoned us, to a dinner at the family estate, a place so heavy with old portraits and older judgment that it practically smelled of history. Alex was there, too, looking as confident as ever, but his eyes darted to me more than they used to, as if measuring something invisible. Richard started first, words sharp and heavy. Emily, have you finally come to your senses? Or are you still determined to throw everything away for him? Emily's hand tightened in mine under the table. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with every word. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what matters to me. Claire interrupted, her tone dripping with disbelief. And you think this is love? After everything? Emily's chin lifted. Yes, after everything. Because he never lied to me about who he was, he just thought love should come before money. And I'm glad it did. The room went silent, the kind of silence that vibrates in your bones. I took a breath. And just so we're clear, I said, voice calm but cutting through the silence, I never needed your approval. I have my own company. Your lawyers know it by now. The same one you've used products from without realizing. This isn't about whether I'm enough for Emily. It's about whether you can accept that you were wrong. Alex tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. His mask of calm cracked for a second, and I saw the fear behind it, the fear that love couldn't be bought, no matter how many dinners or gifts or charming smiles you offered. Richard exhaled, leaning back, a man forced to see a reality he couldn't control. You think you can protect her from the world? I met his gaze, unflinching. No, but I can stand beside her while she faces it. That's the difference. After that night, something shifted. The family didn't openly embrace us, but the pressure eased. They realized the cost of fighting us was higher than the cost of letting go. Alex drifted away, quietly erased from plans and conversations. And Emily, she started to smile again. Really smile. The way she used to in the early days, when we believed love was enough because it was. We moved out of that small apartment, not to prove anything, but because we wanted a fresh start. The new place wasn't massive or ostentatious, but it was ours. Warm light, worn-in furniture, shelves overflowing with books and photos of places we'd been and wanted to go. Sometimes, late at night, Emily would curl against me, her breath soft against my neck, and whisper, I almost lost you. And I'd tell her the truth. You never did. Even when you walked away, my heart stayed with you. We built new routines, quiet mornings over coffee, shared glances across messy kitchens, long drives with no destination except being together. There were scars, of course, moments when old doubts flared up, when family calls reopened wounds. But each time, we chose each other again, and the cracks slowly filled with something stronger than before. And in the end, that's what love really became for us. Not the story her family had scripted, not the performance Alex tried to sell, but the stubborn, imperfect, unbreakable truth of two people who saw each other completely and stayed. She chose me, fully and freely. And I finally chose to let her see everything I am.